Right now we are with Issac Sturgill with Legal Aid of North Carolina. We're answering your questions about evictions. You can text your questions to the number at the bottom of the screen. All right, let's talk about this because this is kind of a text that we keep getting. My landlord's wanting to reject the moratorium. What physically can I do? And I think that's where legal aid probably comes in.
Yeah, so two quick things about that. So number one, if you're a tenant and you've signed the declaration and given it to your landlord to get the protection of this moratorium and your landlord files an eviction court case against you anyway, it's a good idea to go to your court date and to show the judge that you've taken this step and that you've signed the declaration, because if you don't do that, the judge may not know that you have that you're supposed to be protected, and they may enter an eviction against you anyway. So that's number one. Go to court and show the judge that you've triggered this protection. Number two, if a landlord is violating the order by proceeding with an eviction when they're not legally supposed to, you may have other legal remedies available. Legal Aid is a nonprofit. We represent tenants, and our assistance is free as long as you're income eligible, as long as you qualify. And we have a helpline. It's 1-866-219-5262. That's 1-866-219-5262. And so if a tenant thinks the landlord is violating this order, they can also call legal aid, and we may be able to help you get some relief in that situation.
Yep, and we just had the phone number and the website on the screen for you to take down. If you don't get it right now, that's okay. We have this in the Two Wants to Know section in our evictions web story as well. This person is asking, what types of protection is in place for the landlord? If the rent stops coming in, the mortgage still needs to be paid.
Well, one thing that's important for landlords and tenants to know about this order too, it does not relieve the money that the tenant owes the landlord. So it doesn't mean that the tenant doesn't still owe the landlord the money. The order also does not prevent the landlord from charging late fees or other fees under the lease. So all the order does is postpone the landlord's ability to evict the tenant, but the landlord still has the right to go after the tenant for that money. And that's something that tenants need to be aware of too, is even if the landlord can't evict them until January under this order, they are still going to have to, catch that rent up and catch those fees up. If they still owe the money going into the January, they can be evicted at that point.
Right. Okay. So the money is not going away. The money will still be owed, and they can still ask for the rent or put in late fees or interest or any of that kind of thing. This person, oh, go ahead.
I was also going to say, for tenants, a lot of tenants, they're out of work or they've got a loss of income due to COVID. I would encourage them to call 211. Just dial 211 on your phone or look up 211's website online. That's an organization in North Carolina that helps tenants find rental assistance. So if you're a tenant and you need some help paying your rent, that's a resource you can look at too.
We are quite familiar with them. We have the statewide director on every once in a while. They are a great resource. This person is asking, does the eviction memorandum go for hotel residents or people who may live in a building that's a commercial address? If they fill out the paper, are they still unable to be evicted?
That's a little complicated of a question. So the eviction order, the order from the CDC does say that it's not supposed to apply to temporary guest or seasonal tenants at a hotel, and there's some legal debate about what that means. There are, some tenants who live in hotels where if that's their primary residence and they've lived there for some time, they could be considered a tenant under the law that would get protection under this order. But for other people that live in hotels, the law would not consider them a tenant, and this order would not apply. So that there might be some debate there, and that's a call that a judge would have to make on a case-by-case basis.
And if you are in that position, you should definitely call Legal Aid of North Carolina to see if you can get some help navigating that.
We'll give advice to people in hotels too. So if you're in a hotel and you're being evicted, you can call Legal Aid, and we'll try to give you some advice on what your rights are.
This person says, I lost my job and can't afford the rent in the apartment where I have a lease. I found a different complex that I am able to afford the rent. Can my former apartment complex hold me to my lease even though I lost my job due to COVID?
Well, so when you sign a lease, you usually can't break the lease without the other side agreeing to do that. If you do break the lease without the landlord agreeing to do it, regardless of the reason why you want to break it, the landlord could penalize you for that. However, I will say that a lot of landlords, are willing to work with tenants at this point. If the landlord may not be able to evict you because of this moratorium, and if you offer to leave voluntarily, that may be a situation where the landlord will do that and would rather get another tenant in who can pay the higher rent rather than just have you sit there and build up a debt. So I would encourage people in that situation to try to talk with the landlord and see if the landlord will agree to let them out of the lease.
Mm-hmm. This person says, what if the tenant has no loss of income? They're just not paying.
So one of the things that the order requires the tenant to swear to is that they have had a loss in income. So if a tenant has not had a loss in income, this order should not apply to that tenant, and the tenant should not sign that declaration unless that is true.
Okay. Again, Legal Aid of North Carolina, where Isaac is from, is one of the best resources that you have if you have questions or you need to be able to navigate this instance, or really any instance. If you have a question, that's a good starting place, is Legal Aid of North Carolina.
Yes, and yes, we represent tenants in all types of different fashions. And so if you're a tenant facing an eviction, feel free to give us a call. We're happy to speak with you. And our services are free of charge for those who qualify.
Services are free. That is great to know. Thank you so much for answering our questions today. And we always want you to know that you can go to our website. The Two Wants to Know section has an entire story about this and a direct link to Legal Aid of North Carolina.